to you from underneath a peach blossom. It's time for an episode of Be Awesome. Find positivity throughout your life and work, just like our mascot rooster, Steve the Jerk.
Hello, Be Awesome listeners. I am in Aftershock, Anchorage, Alaska, after my trip to visit Santa Claus in the North Pole. Having a great week. We're looking to put out a number of podcasts because I am around a lot of awesome people. And the person I'm about to introduce is one of the most awesome I've had the luxury to get to know over the years. His name is Stan Lujan, and he's from Alaska. I've known him for going on probably 10 plus years. His wife is an executive director of an association that I delivered a keynote at, and been to your house, and we'll get into all that other stuff, but we got a bit of a history, and you've just been, for me, such a beacon of positivity. Every time I see you, you're smiling, you're happy, you're involved, you're engaged. We're going to get into yoga and all this stuff, but Stan, welcome to the empty ballroom before the banquet here. I appreciate you giving a few minutes of your time.
The calm before the storm.
The calm before the storm, absolutely. So, Stan, tell us a little bit about you. Give us your story here, and then let's get into some of the stuff that you and I have had for fun and games and going through life.
Well, I would probably start out by saying that it's kind of interesting. We kind of know each other through labels, like what do you do for a living? What have you been doing for a living? Where did you come from? What city did you live in? Those kinds of things. But when I look at myself, I sort of look at sort of the roots of who I am, and it kind of brings to the surface the last couple of weeks. My sister passed away a year younger than me. She was the first of 7 kids. We were a family of 7 when we were growing up, and she was very close to me, and I was very close to her. So it got me to think about all my childhood and growing up with her, and how difficult it was for the whole family. My father was a pretty dysfunctional kind of dad. He was a hard work ethic-oriented person. He worked in the steel mill and the coal mines before that. And so he was very blue-collar, very strict. He was a disciplinarian. He was, he really did, a lot of damage to our family in terms of, just physical abuse. Spare the rod and spoil the child was his philosophy. And so we all 7 kids, left home before we were all 15 and a half, 16 years old. We all ran away. It was so compelling for us to go somewhere else, to get away from, the sadness and the uncomfortableness and the tragedy of living in our home, that life seemed to be kind of like an oyster for us, like it's got to be better. And so when we all left, we all went on our own adventures. I did as well. I lived in the back of I was a paper boy, and so I delivered papers on Sunday and Wednesday. I also worked as a cleanup boy in a donut shop. It was a part bakery and a part of restaurant, and it was owned by an Italian family. And so when I left home, the owner of the bakery said that I could stay there if I wanted to. So he had a little spot back by the flour sacks, and he put a cot up, and we put a little bedroom back there and stuff. And so I stayed there for the first 3 or 4 months. And then I took a bus ride to Denver. That was about 100 miles south of Denver in Colorado. I lived in Pueblo. And I walked around downtown by the Gates Tire Company. That was a big industry there. And there was a donut shop that had a hire sign. It says, need baker from 10 at night till 6 in the morning. And so I went in and I said, hey, I worked in a donut shop, and I didn't really make donuts, but I cleaned up and stuff, and so I think I could learn how to make them. And so the owner, Dick Pearson, looked at me and he said, it's going to be hard work, but and I don't expect any sloughing off. You got to be there on time. You got to work hard, and if it works out, then we'll see. I'll put you on probation for the first couple of weeks. And so consequently, I worked for him for the next 3 or 4 months. Dropped out of school at that time, and he met with me about 3 or 4 months later and said, Stan, he said, you're getting 85 cents an hour from me. and I'd like to give you a 5 cent an hour raise, but I'll tell you what, you're not in school, are you? And I said, no, I dropped out of school. And I kind of gave him my story about leaving home. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a 15 cent an hour raise if you get back in school. And I said, well, don't you need your parents' signature to get back in school? He said, no. He said, my best friend is the wrestling coach at the South High School in Denver, and his girlfriend is a counselor. And I've already talked to him. And if you want to get in school, then we can make it work. But it's up to you. I'm not going to push you. I'm not going to ask you ever again this question. But it was a Friday, and he said, if you can let me know Monday, one way or the other, and if you don't, you're a good worker, I'll give you the 5 cent an hour raise, and we just continue on. So Monday morning I went in and had coffee with him, and I was going to work that night, and I said I decided to get back into school. So that was a touchy moment for me.
Yeah.
So he was one of those forks in the road that we all sort of face. A choice of doing this or a choice of doing that. And so Dick Pearson really created an opportunity for me that I had somebody that had confidence in me and a vision that I could do something. So I thought, wow, this is a good opportunity. So I started working for him, continued working for him, went to school. I didn't have a lot of friends, but because I was working a lot, and I just made things work. I graduated from high school, and then beyond that, I ended up getting 4 different degrees. I went to the undergraduate school, and then I got a 4-year degree in psychology, got a 4-year degree in education, I got a master's degree in education, I got an MBA at Berkeley, I got a PhD. School was a place that I felt that I could really contribute something and I could be successful at. So, that was a point in time where I could have done, I was exposed to the drug world being on the streets. I had a little place that I rented. It was $4.50 a week. At the Gates Tire Company, they had a lot of casual labor that they hired, so they provided housing for them. And so that's where I lived for those 3-4 years.
Wow. That is amazing. You've never shared that story with me, and that's just amazing. There's no other word for it. And whether it was the 10 cents difference an hour, I believe that, I don't know, this is the first time I'm hearing it, but I would say that the feeling of someone believing in you and there was hope and that the opportunity was there, I don't think you needed the 2 days to think about it. But what you did and what you've become and the person that you are today that people get to know would never think of the struggle and challenge that you had growing up. That's amazing. So you got all those degrees, and you then did what? What have you done?
Well,
since then?
When I graduated from my first, I took it was a 2-year program. It was an associate degree. It was called in the Helping Services because at that time, it was right when the Civil Rights Movement, the law was passed in 1965, and there weren't a lot of opportunities for people that were black or Hispanic in our country. But when the Civil Rights Movement passed, they started providing opportunities for minority people to go to college and to take advantage of those opportunities. So I lined up and decided to go into college, and I got some grants. I got a couple loans, and I started school, and realizing that was just a beginning point. I remember I worked when I finished working for Dick. I got a job at Kmart as a kind of like a warehouse person hauling stuff back and forth. And then there was an opening as an assistant manager in the men's department, so I applied. Nathan Cawthorn, really a nice guy, was my boss. And after about 7 or 8 months, he said, Stan, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And I said, hey, I'd like to be a manager like you at Kmart. That'd be great. We said, well, He said, you and I need to talk. So in the next couple of weeks, we used to have coffee at that time Kmart had its own little deli and stuff. We used to go in there, and we used to be able to smoke at that time too. I didn't smoke, but he did. And he was sitting there smoking a cigarette. And he said, you know how old I am, Stan? And I said, well, no, Nathan, I really never thought about that. He said, well, I'm 44 years old. I've got a wife. Don't have any kids. We probably won't have any. But you know, I started working for Kmart about 10 years ago, and I thought I could go beyond where I'm going now. And I realized that I'm kind of in a dead-end spot. And I could see if you did what I'm doing, you could end up where I'm at today. He said, you have a lot more potential. And I said, well, you know, there's these managers, these Kmart store managers that they work with and hire. They call them Kmart ones. And I said, I bet I could be one of those guys because looks like it's a good career path because they eventually run one of these stores. He said, can't do that. Why not? He said, you don't have a college degree. I says, well, doesn't hard work really replace a college degree if you work hard and you have enough intellect? Can't you really do those kind of jobs? He says, that's not the way the world works. You got to have this piece of paper in your back pocket. You can still have the intellect, you can still have the drive, motivation, but if you don't have that piece of paper in your back pocket, you're only going to go so far, Stan. He said, and that's what's always kept me back. And he said, I think you ought to go to college, and I think you have the potential. So that was another turning point for me. So I decided to really, put my head into university work and really move forward in that. And so I realized that I was always going to be, at some point, always hit a wall if I didn't figure out how the world worked. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't the college degree made you a better man or a better woman or a better human being. It was just one of those things that a standard we put in our society that says if you don't have this, then you can't get to the next step. And so if you have potential, you're going to have to get that in spite of whether you want to or not, but that'll get you around the corner to that next level. Mm-hmm. And so I started learning a little bit about life and how you get through life. You sort of have to figure out the big picture and figure out how you fit into it and what you need to do. It may not be what you want to do initially, but if you have a long-term goal, then eventually you manage to get to that goal. Yep. And so I kind of learned from people like Ivan and Dick Pearson and those kinds of folks in my life, sort of the lessons in getting through life. And those have been instrumental in I think, my success all my life.
Yeah. And how long have you been in Alaska?
This is my 40th year. I came in 1978. I was in the Peace Corps in East Africa. When I graduated from high school, from college, I didn't know quite what I was going to do. And so I thought, well, I wanted to give back to the world somehow. And at that time, the Vietnam War had just finished. And I thought, well, I want to give something back. So I had heard about this program that the Kennedys put together, Peace Corps, and so I applied, and I filled out all the questionnaires that they had me fill out. I went through some interviews, and you put countries in preference of where you'd like to go. And this country I'd heard a lot about, Tasmania, it's close to Australia. I said, boy, I'd like to go there. So I came back 2 weeks later. They called me back for a final interview, and they said, we'd like to put you one of our posts, Stan. And I said, great. Would I be going to Tasmania? He says, no, you didn't put Tasmania. I said, yeah, I did. No, you put Tanzania. I said, really? So I looked, and it was Tanzania. Yeah. And I had hit the wrong line with the check mark. Yeah. So I said, well, I've never been there either. So I went to Tanzania for 2 years. It was like an incredible experience. So when I finished the Tanzanian experience, and at that time, Andrew Young was the ambassador to the United Nations, and Cyrus Vance was Secretary of State, and they came into Tanzania a couple of times to look at how things were going in the country, and the Peace Corps workers were all pulled in from the villages that we worked in, and got to meet those folks. That was a lot of fun, pretty inspirational for me. But when I finished, I didn't really want a normal teaching experience somewhere in the world, and they were hiring in Alaska for teachers on a Yukon River in an Eskimo village, a place called Kotlik. So I called the superintendent, and he answered the phone. And we talked for about 15-20 minutes. He told me about how great the fishing was, and he said he was a former priest, but he had an affair with one of the nuns. They ended up getting married, and so he got excommunicated from the Catholic Church. But he had a degree in education, and then he got an administrative degree, and he eventually became a superintendent of schools. And I said, well, when can we get together to do the interview? He said, hell, Stan, I'm sending you a contract. That was snail mail during that time, no internet or anything.
Yep.
So he said, I'm sending you a contract. I want you to work for me. So I ended up in Alaska in 1978 after the Peace Corps.
Wow. And just as a frame of reference, and I'm not familiar with that community, but many communities in Alaska are remote, they're small, they're spread out. I mean, people don't understand the sheer size of Alaska. It's like 3 times the landmass of Texas. And, for a reference point, there's about 150,000 kids that go to school in Alaska, and there's about 5 million in Texas. So it's really spread out. What was that area like, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, well, you're right, Josh. Alaska is about 1/5 the size of the United States in landmass. It's huge. The school districts are as big as the state of Montana. Some are bigger. They're just huge. And there may only be 8 or 9, 10, 15 villages, Eskimo villages or Inupiat villages or Athabascan villages or a combination of both in a district. So when you get sent out to these posts, it's kind of like being in the Peace Corps in a way. And you work for the state. At that time it was the state-operated system or Bureau of Indian Affairs. Now it's all state-run with regional education attendance areas. But it's an amazing experience out there. It really is going to a third world country, except you're in a first world country here in the United States. And Alaska only became a state in 1959. So that's where we became the 50th state. So we've not been a state that long. So at that time we were a territory, federal territory, like Guam and other places that have been territories. So we really have... It's a very primitive place, and there was a lot of opportunities. That's what I liked about Alaska. It's a place where no matter what your contribution was or is at this time, there's always opportunities to find success if you have something to offer. And it's a place where you get to know a lot of people quickly, because even though it's a landmass, it's immense. In the landmass, there's few people, and so you get to know people quickly, and your reputation is important. And your credibility is important. So it keeps you kind, it keeps you being kind to people, because you're going to meet them all over the place. You meet them in Kotzebue, you're going to meet them again in Nome, you're going to meet at the airport in Anchorage or in Valdez. You're going to run into these people all the time. So it forces you to be sort of the best neighbor you can be, the best human being you can be. So you try to find the best you. I think Alaskans try to find the best themselves, because they know there's high stakes of not being good.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because I flew up to the Fairbanks and then the North Pole. Drove up to North Pole yesterday and then came back to Fairbanks. And on both instances at the Fairbanks airport, people interacted with each other that didn't know that each other were going to be there. It was like just a close, and I go to Logan Airport, and I'll see people on occasion that I know, but most of the time it's thousands of people just walking by each other that don't even recognize one another. And these people are, hey, how's it going? What's happening? And they live probably hundreds of miles away from each other. So that's pretty impressive. And now you're in Juneau. You're how old?
Yeah, I'm 67 years old. I was a superintendent of schools for about 12 years in Alaska in 3 different districts. Had a great time. And then after that I retired. Went to Juneau primarily because it's really a performing arts capital of the country. It's kind of like Austin, Texas. It's just got that kind of performing arts environment that is just great. My wife's a cellist, and so she wanted to join a symphony, and there's a symphony there. So 11 years ago we moved to Juneau, and she became the executive director for the ASBO organization that you are affiliated with, and so I sort of had to recreate who I was at that time. So I got on a couple of boards. It was easy to do that with my expertise and background. And then I ended up being on the symphony board. That's what I'm on right now, the Juneau Symphony Board. I don't play instrument. I don't even play the kazoo very well. But I have the marketing experience and advertising and, I have the finance background, being an MBA graduate. So I have all those things I can add to building a good infrastructure, sustainability for, an organization like a symphony so they can go on and on into perpetuity. That's kind of what the goal of a board member is on the symphony.
Yeah, you actually made a really great point. We had a few minutes here to talk beforehand, and I asked you, because you have such passion for the Juneau Symphony and for the arts in general, and I asked you, what instrument do you play, or do you play an instrument? And you said, well, I don't, and neither does most of our board or all of our board, for the purpose that we can focus on what's important, which is the success of the symphony. And I thought that was really cool. I thought that was lots of people get into something because they're experienced with it, or because they think that they know, because they are a pianist or whatever, they think that they could be that great symphony board member, president, what have you, and you recognize that, hey, I shouldn't be if I'm going to be a part of this, I probably shouldn't be an instrument player, because I'll focus more on the instrument than I'll focus on the success of the actual organization or the business. And I thought that was pretty cool. We were going to do this podcast originally because we're talking about yoga and passion. Yoga. And I was going to do my first yoga experience with you, because you have just with yoga and with the symphony and with your Mini Cooper Club that you got going on in Juneau, and you just have such intensity and passion and excitement that it's almost contagious. Like, just being around you, whatever it is that you're into, it's like I think I need to be a part of that too. But at 67 years old, you're jacked. I mean, you are in great shape, solid, and you're doing yoga 7 times a week and twice on Tuesday. How long have you been doing that?
Been doing it for about 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
Yeah, and I used to play tennis before that, and I was passionate about tennis. I played tennis 5 or 6 days a week, and I just had a great group of people that I was playing tennis with, and they were all anywhere from in their, mid-20s to 80s, and they were great. And then during the tennis season for the high school, we would play with the high school students to get them ready for their tournaments. And sometimes they'd just dust us. I mean, and sometimes we'd beat them. But it was a great camaraderie to kind of nurture some of those young folks, and they can hang out with us and stuff. We had a great time. But then I started having my back started going out about every 6-7 months. It would just because of the jolting and the movement, to pick up the forehand or the backhand, and I started realizing that my body was getting a little older, and it couldn't handle those quick, abrupt moves. And then I started getting plantar fascia on the bottom of my heel, and I used to go in for shots every 6-7 months to have a shot in my heel, a steroid shot to kind of relieve the pain. And then somebody said, Stan, why don't you try yoga? I think that might really be good, the stretching and all those kind of things. So I started taking yoga just 1 or 2 times a week, and then I just replaced tennis with yoga, and it's just become a way of life for me. It's great meditationally. It's great in terms of just my physical fitness. Plantar fascia left. My back problems they've just been eradicated. I haven't had a back problem since. My arthritis behind my toes on my left foot, it's gone now, and yoga has done that for me. And just being around this positive, spirited group of people, whether I do yoga in Austin, I'm there on a business meeting, or whether I'm in Italy and I find a yoga studio. Yoga people that involve themselves in this are all there for self-improvement. They're not there to compete with one another. They're there to really rise to another level of their, sort of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you have the lowest level is food, clothing, and shelter, and the highest level of that pyramid is self-actualization, continual improvement. That's kind of where the yoga folks are. They know that they're not perfect, but they know they want to continually improve. And that's kind of a nice group of people I'd say to be with at any age, and in my age, it's just a blessing to be around these folks.
Yeah. Let me take a step back, because I've just been kind of. This is something that's always of interest to me. That one of the greatest aspects that I find in someone is that when they go through incredible challenge in their life growing up, and it was probably generational. I would suspect that if we look back, and I don't know, I would suspect your father probably went through some abuse from his father or from his father's father.
He did. It was a generational thing.
So the most incredible thing that I see in people is when they break the cycle. And I'm curious, do you ever take time to think about what it was that caused you to break the cycle? Because your dad could have broken the cycle,
Mm-hmm.
your dad's dad could have
Mm-hmm.
broken the cycle. Whenever that whole
Mm-hmm.
process started,
Mm-hmm.
someone has to say
Well-
at some point, I don't want to put people through this.
Yeah.
And you've made a ton of people happy, and you are so contagiously happy every day that it's amazing that no one would ever think. But do you ever think about why you did what you did, the decisions that you made, and the chances? Is it the opportunity that was given to you?
I think that what helped me break the cycle was those years living at home when I was young and seeing my siblings, especially my older sisters and my younger sister who just passed away, being abused. And I was just a little kid and feeling like I couldn't do anything about it. And just telling myself that I'm going to be a better person than that. And I'm never going to, this cycle is ugly and it's horrible, and I don't want anything to do with it. Mm-hmm. And that was really sort of climbing out of that kind of mentality instead of sort of feeling like somehow I have to abuse women because my father did that, or I had to abuse kids because my father did that. Well, somebody has to make a change. There has to be a change. And I could say every one of my siblings did that really well. Mm-hmm. I'd say all of them did it really well. Maybe because my childhood was so severe that it was like black and white. There wasn't kind of a gray area with my dad. It was like he was so extreme that we kept saying, we don't want to be like that. We want to feel safe. We want other people around us to feel safe. We want to create a world that my dad wasn't able to do. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was, I think if I sat with all my siblings, we'd probably think about it that way, mm-hmm. that it's our turn.
Right.
He had his turn. It's our turn.
Yeah. That's a hard thing to do. It seems easy
mm-hmm.
on paper, but it's a hard thing to do when you look to to your parents, to your especially back and in a different time, mm-hmm. that was kind of what you looked up to. Mm-hmm. So you didn't know what else to look at or look up to, and being on basically mm-hmm. by yourself at 15 and a half, mm-hmm. to not just say I'm just going to go with what I always know, but to say I'm going to do the opposite of mm-hmm. what I've always known, mm-hmm. and to do it so well and with such excellence and class and appreciation. Mm-hmm. I mean, you remember all these people that were an impact. I bet you have every person's name that's ever positively mm-hmm. impacted you as a remembrance, mm-hmm. and you appreciate it.
I do. I do. I mean, there's been many, and mostly in my life, I think the most significant people in my life have been men, not women. Mm-hmm. And just because my mom was a very caring, loving person, she passed away a number of years ago, but she was caught up in a time in life in the 50s where men ran everything, mm-hmm. and she felt that she was trapped. Mm-hmm. And but aside from that, when we were together as a family and my father wasn't around, she was gentle, she was kind, she was loving. She was all those wonderful things. So I felt I got a lot of nurturing from her, mm-hmm. But the relationship with the male in my life is what I really needed. Mm-hmm. And I really didn't think of it so strategically as I think of it now. But at that time, it just happened that I was all of a sudden, here was Dick Pearson, mm-hmm. willing to help me. Here was Ray Sarlo at the donut shop, willing to take me in.
Yeah.
And so I think that I looked for the male role model in my life to help me through this. Yeah. It wasn't sort of a conscious decision. It was sort of like a need, a buried primal need that I had. And so I could see most significant people in my life have been all male leaders, people that I've admired. They had characteristics that my dad didn't have, but I admired, and I try to emulate, and I try to learn from. And I think that's carried me. That's sort of hooked me, and like building a railroad. It was one track at a time as I moved through life, and it's really helped.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point with regard to almost a mentor or someone there that didn't step in the place of your father, but stepped in a place of your father in some capacity to help give you hope.
Yeah. Well, all the research, Josh, and I've read a lot of research being, in school and universities as long as I have, is that the most important the important person besides the mom or dad in a child's life is a mentor, an adult mentor. Those are more important. In fact, they suggest that if a parent really wants their child to grow, they don't just isolate them with themselves as the two role models, mom and dad. They open their whole home to other adult role models to come into their child's life, because that's where they're really getting the give and take of what a world really looks like. And that gives them a lot healthier perspective on how to deal with their own issues and how to solve their own problems and how to enjoy and embellish in special moments in their life, to have all those people as role models out there, and that really is helpful.
Yeah, I can say in a relationship to that, with regard to the importance of that, I know that my godparents were instrumental in my upbringing. Other adults that my parents had entrusted, they were neighbors, but great friends and they have family to me now, that they were instrumental to helping my growth outside of my parents. And when my father was not in the picture early on in my childhood, my grandparents and others that stepped up, that each of them had a little piece of something that helped fill that gap or that space, that I think were instrumental to helping me become who I'm proud to be today. It's amazing to see and to think about and to know you as long as I've known you, and not know that history, and sit here and go, wow, Stan just knocked me off my feet, because it's amazing. Again, I wish I had a different word for it. There's nothing greater for me than to see and hear about people's trials, tribulations, and challenges that come out on the other side and go, you know what, this sucked, this was hard, this was difficult, I didn't know how to make donuts, but I was willing to, and I had this one opportunity, and I always say, sometimes life, a good life or a bad life, is one yes or no or one decision away from determining that, and you have to be really selective on what you make for a choice in many situations. You might not get a second opportunity. What if you took the 5 cents and just worked because you weren't sure, you weren't confident in yourself? You took the leap. I mean, you took the step.
There's a marshmallow test. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, the Marshmallow Test.
Yeah.
It's a pretty interesting test, because they come up with all these very expensive tests that test kids on their potential to grow and succeed, and how to predict success, future success. And the Marshmallow Test, it's a test, I think they came out with this test in Sweden or Germany, one of these communities. And they've written a lot of books about this, and they have 4-year-old kids in a room. They're all sitting in front of you, and you give them each a marshmallow, and you say, here's a marshmallow, and here's the clock, and when this little second hand gets to this little chicken, because that's where the 30 seconds, if you don't eat your marshmallow by then, I'll give you another marshmallow. But you certainly can eat the marshmallow if you want. But if you play with it, you roll it around, whatever you want to do, as long as you don't eat it, you get another one. You cash out with a second marshmallow. When it hits the next 30-second, you get another marshmallow. And so they tested these kids, hundreds and hundreds of them. And then for the next 25 years, they followed him. It was a historical study, a futuristic study. And it was almost a positive, perfect one correlation, that the kids who could defer their gratification and get the second marshmallow, and the third, and the fourth, ended up graduating from high school, going on to graduate school, being an engineer, being a doctor, being successful at whatever they were a postal worker, they were successful. And the kids that couldn't delay their gratification couldn't wait. They just ate it. And in life, they just consumed without thinking about the long-term effect, and how saving a little today is going to bring a better alternative later on if you do that. And so, and of course, the big question is, can you teach kids to delay their gratification? And the answer is yes, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to really work with kids to help them do that, to delay their gratification, because it impacts everything they do. They have a girlfriend and now they're 14 or 15. Are they going to delay their gratification and wait to have sex until they're ready, or are they going to have it because they just want the marshmallow, because they want it now? And it impacts every aspect of their life. So I always thought that was really interesting. So I think in me, I was able to delay my gratification for that degree, for that moment, for whatever it was. That delayed gratification really kept me going. And I think that was probably built into my DNA possibly, or somehow I learned that. And that was important for me to succeed. And resilience, an ability to be resilient. Under the worst scenario anybody could think of, people that were in Auschwitz and the people that survived psychologically okay, they had this sense of resilience. What makes one person resilient and another person not? Those are going to be age-old questions we're going to keep looking at and trying to discover the answers to. But I think I had resilience.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely going to do a little research on this marshmallow test, because that makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that I ever heard it. And I'm not sure what I would have done with a marshmallow if I was a kid and I had that sitting in front of me.
Well, I think back and I'm thinking I might have eaten that darn thing, because there were 7 people at the table. My uncle lived with us, my grandma lived with us, and we were all, there looking at the same bowl of beans.
Yeah.
We wanted our share, right?
Yeah.
So you get used to just like getting what you wanted.
Yeah.
So somehow
it was what you could get.
Develop that.
Yeah.
But my mom always made sure, she said, just because somebody's like Michelle Obama, just because somebody's going low, you go high. And my mom always used to say that. She said, just because somebody's in the gutter doesn't mean you have to climb in with them. Just because somebody does that to you doesn't mean you have to become them.
Yeah.
And same thing with cussing and those kind of things. So, you just have those little vignettes of memories in your life that kind of go back to say, maybe that's why one of the parts that helped me become who I am today. That contributed to the overall mass of who I am as a human being.
Yeah, an awesome human being.
Thanks.
I mean, an absolutely awesome human being. I don't think I could fit enough in one podcast of just the engagement, the human engagement that I have experienced personally. We walked down this hallway. You asked each and every person how they were doing and saying hello to them. You were walking in the door and we were getting ready to get set up, and you disappeared because you saw somebody you knew and wanted to talk to them. That passion, that care, that genuine intention of wanting to know how people are doing is something we don't see enough. You and Amy and I were talking about, how people say, how are you doing? And they truly don't care about it, but you do. Your Mini Cooper stories, you're starting your club of 57, right?
57 Mini Coopers in Juneau.
57 Mini
Registered
Coopers,
Mini Coopers.
57 registered Mini Coopers in Juneau. When you find one that's not on your club, you have a welcome packet with a Ziploc bag that you put on their windshield and hope they come to a meeting. And you go to the Mini Cooper dealership up here to get giveaways, to have as door prizes for meetings that you hold. I mean, you're just having fun and you're enjoying yourself and you're doing it at the same time of having it so that other people can have fun and selflessly.
Kind of spreading the love.
Yeah.
And I think that I've had a lot of good fortune in my life, a lot of love in my life. You can see, knowing Amy, my wife, she's just like an incredible human being. I've got a lot of, I've been graced by a lot of blessings in my life. And it's I got to keep spreading that, because that's important. And I won't be on this earth, for too many more years. And if I could just carry that message to other people, if somebody gives you some goodwill, you pass it on to somebody else, and it makes the world a more beautiful place to live.
Yeah. Well, that's a great way for us to close this out, because they're setting up the casino.
Oh yeah, the casino night.
Setting up casino night in here, and
thanks.
Stan, I got to tell you, this was absolutely awesome. I hope that I can get up for the Juneau Symphony, or maybe
well, you got the
something.
program now.
I got the program. In summertime, I look for the Christmas lights.
Maybe the Pops concert in June.
Yeah,
we have that Israeli-American conductor with Jessica Cho, who's 2 degrees from from Juilliard School of Music and one from Peabody.
Yeah.
She's going to do the Rhapsody in Blue piano concerto.
Yeah.
It's going to be beautiful. You're going to love it.
Well,
That's June of this coming year.
We'll have to figure out if I can make my way there. I think that one of the things that I've been just really excited to explore is how to help arts and music and programs for kids. We just finished up. We gave a check for $1,503 to the Fairbanks Youth Advocates Group, Santa Claus. That's where I was up in the North Pole yesterday.
That's great.
And some folks bought T-shirts here, so we're going to put another $100 up there. So that's $1,633. I think $1,633. We're going to do $130. I'm sorry, because two people rounded up. That was nice of them to do. And I've been trying to think about what I'm going to do because I give $3 of every shirt. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the shirt program, but I sell my T-shirts. I give $3 of every shirt as a representation of the 3 million foster and homeless children that we have in the United States, to try to make it's a small difference, but if enough threes hit, the number goes up, and that's a pretty impressive number for a startup.
It is.
Right around 400 shirts, and people giving extra too. And so my next mission on this, I think, is to look at some programs to try to help get some kids some opportunities, because we've got some great talent. We've got kids that have such talent but can't afford an instrument, or to be able to get into an art class, or do even a robotics class or something. So we're gonna look.
Reminds me of that starfish story. I don't know if you know the starfish story.
Yes,
that's a great story.
To
that starfish, it makes a difference.
Yep.
You can't get to all of them, but you can get to one or two before the tide, goes out and dries them all up. But you want to throw them back in the water to save a few.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's important, because that's how the world gets better.
Yeah, one at a time, one starfish at a time. If you want to see and hear more about the starfish story, just go to YouTube and do starfish story. There's a number of different renditions. One's as low as 1 minute and 46 seconds, and one is the original story, which I think is from the it's from the 60s, 50s or 60s. It's been around a long time. Yeah, it's like 14 minutes is the lengthened version with music that'll make you cry. But it is a great story. So, Stan, I really appreciate you being here. We're going to go up. We're going to be here. I'm in Anchorage here for a couple more hours. I have to say that the Alaskans are just incredible, and we talk about resilient. We had a 7.2 magnitude earthquake that anywhere else that they've experienced one that was above 5 had fatalities, casualties, and chaos. And I'm here 2 days later, and the resiliency.
Still feeling tremors.
We've had a couple of doozies this morning. I mean, and we're talking serious swaying and feeling of the pit in your stomach going, uh-oh, and then it stops. But the people's smiling and work as usual, as you could hear in the work in the background. We're in a banquet hall, has been phenomenal, and always the open door policies of how everybody's so welcoming here is fantastic.
Alaska is drawn me because of that. I think maybe because of my childhood. I love being in a place where it's the majority of people are very accepting and wholesome and honest and they're candid. Any dress attire fits here. You don't have to be in vogue to fit in. You don't have to be rich to fit in. You just have to be a good human being, and that's enough. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the way I dress, I'm glad that I fit in. There'll be pictures on social media of what I'm wearing today and my original Christmas garb. Well, thank you very much. Great. Well, we're going to wrap this episode up. Stan and I are going to go have a celebratory drink. I'm going to make my way back to the East Coast so I can get to North Carolina, Ohio, Seattle, and I'm not sure where else in the next week and a half or so. So I'm going to be putting some podcasts out for you, as always. I can't thank you all enough for listening, supporting, buying shirts, sharing, liking, and commenting, and rating and reviewing. Still got a couple of shirts and books. I'm going to keep pushing. I'm going to keep giving shirts and books away. If you take the time, I know you're taking time out of your day to rate and review my podcast. But if you do that, that helps raise my game and where I am and how I fit in the whole scheme of things. So if you rate and review and you don't have an obvious name that I know, drop me an email. I'll send you a shirt. I'll send you one of David Cook's books. I got a couple of those left. If you don't know who he is, he's the author of From Paralysis to Purpose. I did a podcast with him a few weeks ago in a Starbucks in Madison, Wisconsin. Phenomenal human being with a great message. But as always, beawesome.com, beausm.com. $3 of every shirt that's purchased online, in person, at the airport, in the air, wherever I am. We're going to be giving that to a worthy cause. I'm going to have an announcement here in the next week or so for the next mission on that. But $3 is being set aside for every shirt that's purchased to help support homeless and foster kids at some capacity. Really appreciate the opportunity to help the Fairbanks Youth Advocates Group. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. You can find me there. Follow me, connect with me. Let me know how I'm doing. In the meantime, we almost had a catastrophe with a table fall. But in the meantime, if you want to do awesome, you got to be awesome. Have a great week, everybody. And thanks again, Stan.
You're welcome.